My name is Christy Wyckoff, and I own Redwing Ranch. I've been connected with this land for about 18 years. I grew up on a small ranch in rural California, and when I was 13, we moved to Seattle. And that was a very instructive move because we moved right to the middle of the city, and that quickly showed me that I was very much a ranch kid. As the years went on, I started thinking about what it would take to be more connected with the land again when I was an adult. And when I was in grad school, I decided to kind of dip my toe in and purchased some land out here. While I was going to grad school working on wildlife ecology, which is what my professional path is, I was leasing the ranch and not super involved with this day-to-day work. And then my work in California after I graduated with my PhD was involving a bunch of wildlife research, and we were specifically looking at some endangered species and habitat management to improve those populations. And our primary tool in super hilly and very challenging terrain of the Central Coast California was to use cattle, because the land needed disturbance, and fire is still challenging to put on the ground through prescribed means. And mowing is really not an option in a lot of that terrain, plus it's got its own caveats. So we started with cattle, and quickly I started to understand cattle could be a tool, and the rate of change that we saw out there was amazing. And so here I was supervising the science of our grazing program, and literally traveling the country, proselytizing on how cows could be a solution for so many of our environmental challenges. And I could not get those same tools of targeted, intentional, planned, and managed grazing happening on my own place. Eventually I decided it was time for me to come back and try my hand at replicating what we'd had successes on in California. But coming at it there, I was a nonprofit science-based organization. And here we are a profit-driven ranch operation. And so we're doing a ton of infrastructure work, and we're trying to understand our resources so that we can target our grazing better. So this is the first year that we've had this many animals. Last year we were wildly understocked, and that was the plan because we didn't really know how the infrastructure was going to work, transitioning from a set stock continuous grazing to more of a adaptive paddock-based system. We've also been able to dial down the paddock sizes. So on average, most of our interior fenced pastures, we have about 29 pastures, and each of those they're all different acreages, but most of them kind of fall in like the 60 to 120 acre size. And so our goal this year is to split those into smaller paddocks so that we can increase the animal density on the land. So it's this balance of trying to make sure that we get a lot of animal impact and herd effect on every acre, but not like stressing the animals out by putting them somewhere there was not enough food. So time is like our greatest tool. Lately, they've been in about 25 acre pastures, and they'll be in them for like a day, and then we move them. We change the order that we graze every year. So these 2 years, and that's the plan, is from here on out, we'll graze the ranch in different patterns each year so that we're not putting a selective pressure on any one plant or pasture at the same time every year. And then we also want to vary the intensity with which we graze, because that gives like resets to some of the systems, but then allows them to have more rest in other years. That's the adaptive part. Sometimes they can stay longer than we thought they would, as they have to go faster. You gotta have eyes on the animals and the pasture.
How critical is your irrigation to your operations?
Right now, it's essential. Absolutely essential. My goal is for us to not need it, for it to be a luxury, by basically having healthier soils that retain more moisture and just hold the moisture better and are more resilient. I think that we could go to functionally dryland ranching in the years that we have to, and not hopefully see a huge impact. It's ambitious, but I've seen what managed grazing can do, and so I think it's very doable. I'd say that the big goals on the ranch are to improve resilience. And through that involves, soil health, increased infiltration of water, reducing bare ground because it's very high in some of our pastures, increasing overall biodiversity, just because there's so many benefits to that. It helps your microbial communities in the soil, and it helps your above ground critters. There's all kinds of synergy between different plants, and all of that will drive our increased carrying capacity. So right now, we conservatively estimated that we could run about 350 steers for 4 months this summer. So we're doing custom grazing. I think we could probably push that to 500 animals in the next couple years, assuming that the trajectory goes as I expect it to. And then from there, we could increase it even further. There's certainly the, carbon footprint associated with beef story that everyone's talking about, which wildly misrepresents most of the beef industry, in particular, most of the lifetime of the animal that goes into the system for beef. But I also think this idea that we should be reducing the footprint of grazing is very short-sighted. This conversation about reducing grazing on public lands and reducing overall consumption of beef and things like that, I think is crazy. We will just create an entirely new suite of land management, desertification, wildfire, airidification, all these issues on our working lands, which I think is not well understood. Science continues to tell the story of how managed grazing can really benefit your ground, and we can start talking about how many acres are under management, under that kind of managed grazing in the US. I think we could totally change the conversation of eat less beef because of the carbon footprint when people start to realize that managed grazing actually contributes to carbon sequestration. There's this narrative that there's no future for young people who want to get into it because land prices are so high and because cattle are so expensive and blah, 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 all the upkeep, the startup costs. Not at all the case. There are all kinds of operators who are making it work and are some have actually transitioned from very conventional owning land and livestock to doing this because it is so much better, where you custom graze, so you don't own the animals, you lease land, so you don't own the land, and your overhead is very small. So a custom grazing contract, we have no liability for mortality. So if an animal dies, unless it's gross negligence on our part, no liability. The owner pays for all of the doctoring. They pay for all the shipping. You do monitoring on there, and your price for the lease goes down as you improve the ecological metrics, which is, if you're doing adaptive grazing, not hard to do. So there are models of this out there. Ranching for Profit has opened my eyes to all kinds of opportunities. There's also, as a leasee, you can get in on EQIP and CRP and CSP and a lot of those programs, PRF, all of those. So there are other sources of income that can help you make that operation work. I think that there's opportunities to change the story, and that's probably the most powerful thing.